Chapter 6 Lioness Revenge. Benson. While tending the cows and goats, Nunu saw a lion in broad daylight. He brought the animals back to the village and put them in their stable. My mother locked us in the hut. The men usually take care of their families, but my father had been in the hospital for 3 weeks. Nunu was still a teenage boy, so our mother became the man and the woman in our home. The lioness came back that night. She battered her claws on the latch of the door to our house. My mother braced herself inside by the door and took up our father's harpoon, the same one he'd killed the lion with. She shouted, pretending to be a man, but the lioness seemed to know that she was just a woman and would not go away until the sun was above the trees, and the men from the cattle camp came to see us. The next night, and every night after that, the lioness returned and patrolled the compound. She clawed at the door, and all night we heard her roaring. My mother couldn't sleep. Every day the men had to escort her to fetch water from the river or collect firewood to cook our dinner. Everyone in the village knew that the lioness was looking for revenge for the death of her mate. The village chief warned his men that they must not let harm come to us while our father was away. The day my father came home, supporting himself with a big long stick, the lioness left the village and went back to the darkness of the jungle, but we could still hear her roaring at night. The scars of that battle were printed on my father's chest, and I was very proud every time I heard the villagers talking of how bravely he had fought and killed the lion. But through all these battles and all the sounds at night when they fought near our home, I have never seen a live lion and had no real idea what it or many other animals people talked about looked like. One night I saw lights in the bush. "Look," I said to my father, "there is a hand torch." "It's not a torch, son. It's the eyes of the lion glowing in the dark." "That is why I always want you beside me. Creatures crawl at night searching for their dinner. Children make good meals for hyenas and lions. No child is safe wandering between the villages when darkness covers the land. But don't worry. No harm will ever come your way. You are my own warm blood, and every creature knows that. I will always be here to protect you from anything. Even the small crawling ant will not dare to offend you while I'm around." My father tried to make me feel safe, but his talk frightened me, and I had nightmares. I kept seeing those lights glowing in the bush. The villagers believe it is a healthy omen to have a lion in your nightmares, but I knew the lioness was waiting for her revenge. Every Dinka boy and girl looked forward to becoming a teenager and going to live in the cattle camp. It was like going to college. If parents didn't take their children, people mocked them, saying that they would not be fit for marriage. According to Dinka life, young men in the village did not stand with a girl in conversation. If a young man wanted to speak to a girl, he had to give his message to her little brother, who brought the girl's response back to him. But they could mix freely in the cattle camp. Many young men and girls stayed in the cattle camp until they married. Our villages gathered their cattle at a place called Ch6. It was wet and swampy with many rivers and plenty of grasses. There was a building for shelter from rains and storms, but only girls used it. No matter how hard it rained, boys had to sleep outside. Not because of the girls inside, but because the rule was that boys should stay in the rain the way cows do. A boy was voted to be Majak Wut, or head of the camp. Whoever was Majak Wut decided when to move to another place because the grass was finished or because some cattle were showing signs of sickness. Everyone at camp had a part to play. The big boys traveled with the cattle to distant pastures. They measured their herding by cutting notches on their sticks to mark how many days they'd spent taking the cows to grass. Anyone found cheating had to repeat his 15-day duty over again. Younger boys and girls walked with the calves near the camp. Girls usually milked the cows, but both boys and girls did it together if it was raining. All the kids back in the village liked to pretend we were at the cattle camp. We would move our little clay models around in the grass, mingling them together to make a larger herd and pretending to drive them with small sticks. My favorite time came during the competition called Luwani Ku. The young men with the most cows showed off their riches by becoming the fattest to try to win the prettiest and cleverest girls. They drank only milk from their own cows. No other source of food was allowed. At first, when their stomachs were running, they could visit the toilet only once a day. By the end of summer, when the cattle camp dispersed, they returned to the villages, and everyone, young and old, gathered to see who was the fattest. The champion was honored by the killing of many bulls, and the prettiest girls danced with him, even if he couldn't dance well, because he was so heavy. When small children played Luwini Ku, we filled big gourds with water, laid in the bush, and pretended the water was milk. We had fun beating out our play drums, sticking our stomachs out, and dancing like the fattest winners. But I regret that I never got to go to the real cattle camp. Since the cock crow of Dinka culture, any girl who still had her lower 6 front teeth was not allowed to marry a man who owned a lot of cattle. She is not from a rich family, people would say, or maybe she is from the city, and that is why she has not removed her teeth. City girls are not respectful of their husband's family. Young men were allowed to keep their lower teeth, but they struggled to attract the pretty girl that breaks every man's heart. Girls told those with teeth, "You aren't a man. You haven't endured the pain of manhood." Dinka removed the teeth to distinguish themselves from other tribes who bear different marks on their bodies, such as scars on their head or bodies. It has been our practice since before our grandfather's time. The initiations occur between the ages of 6 and 12, because it is more difficult and more painful to remove the teeth when a person is more mature. I didn't want to have my teeth removed, but I was young and I couldn't question the tradition. I knew I must obey my parents. When I was 6, my permanent teeth emerged. My mother told me one morning, "Go to your uncle's house. It will be less painful when your teeth are weak early in the day before eating anything." 3 boys and 1 girl waited at my uncle's house. He called the girl first because he thought that if she was left until last, she might be scared. "Come sit and look upward." He took out a fish spear that looked like a long nail. "Open your mouth." He pushed the fish spear between the 2 bottom front teeth and pressed the gum down with it. Blood filled her mouth. He pushed harder, and the teeth bent as the spear penetrated the gum. When he swung the spear left and right, her teeth dropped to the ground. The girl was as silent as a grave, and done in a few minutes. I was next. I was nervous, but thought it would go okay, as it had seemed to with the girl. I sat down on my knees and looked upward. My uncle suggested. He held my head firmly in his big hand. "Don't move." He pushed the spear between my teeth as he had done with the girl and pressed down. My gum felt like it was being torn by a razor-sharp blade. My mouth filled with blood. Then the fish spear penetrated through my teeth, splitting one in 2 and leaving half of it in the gum. I began to sob from the pain and my body convulsed. He gave me a slap on my cheek for moving before he inserted the spear again and pushed my chin upward so that I accidentally swallowed some of the blood. I began choking and couldn't cry more. He dug in my gum so hard that he tore it apart. When he finally got out the other half of the broken tooth, he scolded me for crying because I had made it so hard for him. When he was done, my mother boiled a pot of water to wash the blood out of my mouth and gave me a small tin with sand to spit the blood into. The other 2 boys followed in my steps, and they cried out too. We were all shamed that day for being bettered by the girl. Not long after my teeth were removed, my sister, Engong, became first wife to a man from a village 2 hours north of ours. When Engong's baby was born, my mother sent me to stay at her house to care for her goats and watch my new nephew. I liked being with my big sister, but I missed my mother and father, Akun, Alepho, and my friends. The year I was at my sister's house, people began coming through her village from the north, asking for food. They were Dinka, but many spoke a different dialect. Angong told me that the Mirahilian had attacked their villages with shooting helicopters, and that the people were heading south to Bor and on to Ethiopia because war was coming to southern Sudan. When Angong wasn't around, her husband's second wife gave me work and made me do things for her family. I am not her son, I told Angong, but Angong couldn't help me. She was sick with conjunctivitis. So one day I walked home by myself. I thought I knew the way, but it was longer and more confusing than I had remembered. When I reached Jewel, it was nearly dark. My mother was angry that I had come by myself. I told her about the other wife and how I missed my home. She said I could stay, but would have to go back to Angong's house in a few months. People from the north came in a line every day through the village. I told her, "They are begging for something to eat and we are running out of food." "They have been coming here too," she said. One night when my father returned from a trip, he thought I was sleeping. He told my mother about an attack at a village called Akwik-Kuk. The Mirahilian had quickly surrounded the village on horseback and captured many civilians and shot dead those who tried to run away. The captives were separated into two groups. The women and children were locked inside the huts and burned to death. The men were tied up, led to the riverside, killed with a machete and dropped into the river. My father told my mother that he got away by jumping into the river. I didn't sleep that night thinking about those women and children burning inside their homes. The next day my father gathered all of us together. "Listen carefully," he said. "You must be prepared. The government troops are Arabs and call themselves Muslims. The Arabs wear a long white dress with a large handkerchief tied to their heads and pray by kneeling and smelling the ground every day. They speak a strange language that we cannot understand, but some speak Dinka. They call us slaves or infidels and want to kill us for not circumcising our girls and becoming Muslims like them." Hearing my father talk about these bad things scared me more than the story the night before. Usually adults didn't mention war in front of the children. Alepho was only 4 years, but even he looked worried. Akun was older, and I could tell he understood all this better than me. "If our village is attacked, don't panic or make any noise. Just leave the house and hide somewhere safe. Those men's guns shoot fire embers that search far and kill even into hiding places. If there is shooting or unusual roaring noises, remain in hiding and stay quiet there as long as you can hear that sound. Stay away from the house. And you must beware. Some of the Muslims are traders from Dinka tribes. They speak the way we do. They may call to you, 'Come back, we are Dinka, don't run away. We are not your enemy, we will not harm you.' But when people come out of their hiding places, the traders laugh and say, 'You are called by your death,' and those people are killed." This was very confusing. I had never seen a Muslim. How would I know what to look for? "Why do those Dinka men do that terrible thing?" asked Akun. "Why are they killing us?" "They are city criminals," my mother said. "They want money, and they want our cattle." My father's warnings echoed in my head. Everything was confusing. I didn't know who was evil and who was good. Sometimes rebel soldiers fighting the government came into the village and demanded food. The villagers called them Koriyam, locust. This confused me too. How could people be locust? The villagers seemed scared. Once 3 rebel soldiers came to our home in the night and roused us from our sleep when my father wasn't home. They ordered Mother to send Akun, my eldest brother, to the open goat shed. She begged them to take milk instead of a goat, but they threatened that if they had to open it by themselves, they'd take much more. Finally, she gave up and sent Akun to open the door. The greedy soldiers, who had been expected to take a lamb or kid, took our 3 best goats. When Akun tried to stop them, they beat him, breaking one of his teeth. "Why didn't the men of the village stop those evil soldiers?" I asked my mother. These aren't evil, she said. They are fighting for our freedom. Although I hoped the soldiers would never come to our home again, I liked to look at their pale orange uniforms, big hats, and the guns they slung on their shoulders. I sometimes pretended to be like a soldier by putting a stick on my shoulder. I'm fighting for our freedom, I told my friends. Give me food, give me milk, or I will take all your cows and goats. Don't do that, Mother scolded when she heard me one day. I looked down at the ground and said nothing. It's not safe playing like a soldier. The government troops are killing everyone who has seen or talked to these rebels. She called me inside and spoke to me in a way she had never done before. My son, times are dangerous. The Murahilian gunmen are killing a lot of us. They are burning food and homes and seizing children and livestock. My son, the world is ending. Her voice was terrible. It scared me, but I knew she spoke the truth. I heard a roar from a big town a 2-day walk away the week before while I was tending the cattle. It's the roaring of the artilleries, a coon had said. There was fighting between the rebel forces and the government troops. Benson, Mother said, you don't understand what is bad and what is good. I am worried about you. You don't know how much I need you. I want you to be safe, my son, for the rest of my life. You must stay alert from now on. If you hear guns shooting louder or nearer than before, I want you to flee from the house. Run fast and hide in the bush. Don't be captured and take away or hurt. She spoke with grief in her voice that day. And stop your playing with guns. You must play like a Dinka child. Model cows or some other kind of animals. Dinka don't own guns. They are the most evil thing I have ever seen in my life. It's bad luck pretending to be a rebel soldier. To my mother, many things indicated bad luck. Most of all, the day the sun became covered in red, leaving the world almost in darkness during daytime. It's happening once more, she had said. The sun is dying. This is bad luck. The sun is one of God's driving forces that shines on the world to see what good or bad people are doing. Its light alerts God that mankind has failed to attend its evils. If the sun sees many evils, it stops looking and takes the message and reports to God. You see, she said, looking at me seriously, long ago the sun and moon fought over that duty. The sun defeated the moon in wrestling, and the moon was thrown on the hot ashes. His face was burned, and that's why you see some dark scars on it. The moon is blind now and cannot see the many evils that happen at night. Only the sun does this, and that is why it has disappeared, and now we are left in darkness during the day. This hasn't happened since I was a little girl, she said. It was a bad sign then. The first Arab horsemen began raiding our villages, but then they were only using long spears. There were no guns. I was scared that day, seeing the sun dying, hearing the hyenas crying, and knowing that man's too many evils had darkened the earth. Shortly after we were given those warnings, Aguak, a nearby village, was attacked. The men tried to fight the invaders with spears, but they were all killed in a few minutes. There was a plane standing above trees, pouring fire on them, my mother lamented. The adults no longer hid the subject of war from us. We heard it everywhere, day and night in our huts, from our parents. A few days later, horsemen attacked and killed countless villagers at Warawar, just north of our village. They burned the crops and nailed a baby on a fig tree like Jesus on the cross. People who knew how to read said the dot marks on the paper said, Jesus, your God was here. Tomorrow you must return to Ngong's house, my mother told me. She needs help with your nephews. No one is safe here. They want to pour fire on us from the sky.